Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have another very interesting show. I have invited two partners in a series of conscious communities that are just beginning to get built across the planet. Places where people who are thoughtful, creative, interested in living with people of similar mind, artistic, people who want to live outside of the conventional ways of living, actually, and be self-sufficient, autonomous, off-grid. Well, this is developing more and more across the planet, and there's some people who are sort of at the top of that game. And those are some of the people that we'll be speaking with today, Dakotah and Marcus, who right now are in Guatemala and speaking to us from one of the first places that is being made into a cohere and coherent community. So Dakotah and Marcus, a pleasure to have you on A Better World today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, we're really excited to be here and share with you what we're working on.
I'm so glad. Just by footnote, Dakotah and I met in Vilcabamba, Ecuador last year. And when he introduced me to what he was doing, I got completely excited by it and said, I've got to learn more, and we've got to get you on A Better World to share this with our audience. So I'm so glad you're here now. Finally, we pulled it together.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just love what you've been building with A Better World. And that's really the essence of Cohere and Cohere Network.
Please tell us about it. Unfold it, because it's got so many interesting aspects, including the aesthetic one. You are, and it should be said, a Frank Lloyd Wright based architect. So that means you're bringing a certain level of mindfulness and consciousness to what it is you're doing in the design of the community. And you've also put together a financial structure that is like second to none. So these are just a few of the things that we'd love to know about your new ecosystem. Tell us.
Yeah, well, yeah, the core of this is, how do we take this dream of creating a regenerative way of living that's been around for decades and implement it in a timely manner? And as we often talk about, we're well aware of the issues of the world, from isolation, loneliness, collapsing ecosystem, tyrannical governments, you name it. And so what we really looked out and set out to do is, how do we actually create a network of coherent and conscious communities that have what they need to thrive? And we see Cohere as our role is helping to plant seeds. And what we're building are conscious communities that are directly member owned. And the ecosystem is really empowered by the economics. And so I'm here with Marcus, who's really leading our Web3 and the side where we're integrating these new technologies like blockchain to actually make that possible. Because we really believe that if we're going to create a new system in this world, we need to change some of the core economic incentives. Because currently the economic incentives are, how much can I extract and how can I undercut the other guy to get ahead? And what if we could create a system, this is what we've been working on, where if I steward the land and if I help my neighbor, I get ahead directly, financially. And so we're building spaces around the world for remote workers. Since COVID, the remote working market has boomed. We have 35 million new digital nomads in the United States alone. And when we look at this market segment, 90% of people say their number one pain point is community. And people are already lonely, and then you add COVID on top of it, and all the lockdowns. People are really, really desperate for meaningful connection. And so that's what we're building for. We're building living communities around the world for people who are running their businesses remotely, and really targeting the change makers, the cultural creatives. The people are here to stand up for humanity and stand up to be in right relations with our planet. So these are the facilities we're building. We're offering collective, decentralized membership. Everyone who's a member in the Cohere Network actually owns a share of it. And this is, as we were joked in the past, like Cohere is a combination of a real estate investment trust fund, a nonprofit, a co-op,
Timeshare.
Timeshare or REITs, all these things kind of mixed in together that's empowered by blockchain technology.
And crypto based actually too.
Yes.
Just what the heck.
It's what empowers the system because, and Marcus, you can speak to this more intelligently than I, but that's a really essential piece. Is how do we use this new technology to empower this?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear about that, of course, Marcus. And I just want to reflect for a moment on what you're saying about the state of the world, and it's dire. And while we ourselves personally may know how to create a lot of fun out of nothing, and that's a great skill and one that we'll need more and more. At the same time, we look around at our brothers and sisters and see so much sadness, so much loneliness. And what's the answer? The answer really is, as you're saying, Dakotah, community, building it, and not just any community, but a community that is self-sufficient, that is autonomous, that wherein you can take your talents, your skills, your art, and contribute it to the community and actually be remunerated for it, recognized, acknowledged through something that has a real sort of material value, and use it for sustaining yourself. And that's, I know, one feature of the larger, monetary structure you put together, but one that I've always, really resonated with. So just wanted to bring that out. Marcus,
just to
please
emphasize a little bit on why we're seeing Cohere emerge. It's like the more and more people we talk to about Cohere, the more excited they are. They're like, this is exactly, on a daily basis, we encounter people who tell us like, this is exactly the idea I had in my mind. And it's really because it's just a function of the times we live in, right? So as Dakotah mentioned, we're living in like more isolated societies where more and more we're sort of being forced to live these very unhealthy lifestyles, very sedentary lifestyles, where life is very restricted, right? And not only that is like everything that we do, it seems that like the easiest route is one that is harmful to the environment and the people around us, right? So like all of us intuitively know and feel that that's not what we came to this earth to do. And if intuition isn't telling you enough, then look to the science, right? Like look to, in fact, like my big sort of awe-inspiring moment was I took a trip to Greenland a few years back and was standing at the edge of the big ice, which is the largest ice cap in the Northern Hemisphere. And I was just looking at how drastically the ice melt that has occurred over the last few decades has been, right? And so if my intuition wasn't enough and if the science wasn't enough, like it's hard to really conceptualize, practically speaking, these issues that we're facing, but everyone is really sensing that something is wrong. And everyone's really returning back to source and to truth of like, is this really what I came to do in this life? And so I think that's like what Cohere is. We're offering people a chance to live in community in this very regenerative way, and all of it powered by this very innovative Web3 infrastructure. So I think that's what's most exciting about this is everyone finds this deep resonance with what we're building, and it's really inspiring.
That is so interesting. I agree. There is one of the interviews I've done with an author of a book called The End of Ice, just to top off what you're saying about Greenland. And he is a hiker and a journalist, a world-renowned journalist, Jamal. And there's one of the saddest books I've ever read, because it's about this guy who's been, on the ice for decades. And the last time he went, there were puddles literally at all the major national parks around the world, not just in North America, but especially. And, it's just, I know what you mean. It's incredible. So here, I want to just, in coming back to Cohere, just to say, you are coming up with a series. This is another really interesting feature that I'd love for you to talk to, Dakotah, which is it's not just one wonderful, intentional, conscious community, which, by the way, has happened many times in places like Findhorn, for instance, and all over the world, and Russia, interestingly. They've got a lot of eco-villages. And the human dilemma shows itself there. And it's all well and good. It has to be worked through. Transformation is needed of consciousness, no question. At the same time, having a series of them creates a kind of an attenuation and other opportunities. And I'd love for you to talk to that. I think that as a model is really interesting, because I come across people all the time that say, I own 25 acres and I want to build it out into a community. And I think to myself, good luck. You know? And that's because I have as a backdrop Cohere.
Well, it's such a good point. And we're all seeing the need to become self-sufficient so we can thrive. And all of the amazing communities that exist and all the amazing ones that are forming are all fantastic. And there's inherently a limitation. When you only have one, you only have so much energy or economy that you can build. And you practically have some tangible limitations. Instead, when you have a network of communities tied together, now you have the ability to, one, travel to many different communities. One of the things is the challenge in most intentional communities is access to equity of the building of the community.
Mm-hmm.
You have a gardener, a farmer, or a permaculturalist. Maybe the most important person in a community, if supply chains get disrupted.
Yes.
They come and they work 10 years and they have nothing to show for it. Then the dynamic shifts, human drama and trauma comes in, and now someone wants to move, but they have nothing to show for all the energy they put into the system. And that's not very functional. And so with Cohere, every location is held in a commons. And together we create a very large pool of value. That pool of value we have then tokenized. We've taken the shares of that pool of all these different properties, and we've made cryptographic representations of that. So we've put that on the blockchain, which is an immutable ledger, where it's, fairly foolproof. It's just, here's your ownership percentage of this thing that we're building.
It's a public declaration of, in this case, ownership. And
exactly.
Ownership, in this case, of shares.
Yeah, shares in a commons. And a commons is ever growing in assets. So, someone trying to start off an intentional community, we see it, many of our friends are doing this. And we've all seen it. Let's get 100 of our friends and go start a community. Well, that's challenging because one, how are you self-organizing? How are you self-organizing when everyone else has got a job on the side?
Yes.
Or this is on the side to a job? And then the other challenge is everything's a challenge. Who's the architect, who's doing the land development, who's doing the marketing? Governance, you name it. So what we've done with Cohere is we've actually created that prototype. We've created that model where Cohere provides the rails for people to plug into community. And so if someone has land, they, instead of trying to raise the money to build it out and raise for the infrastructure and then market it and then bring in a pool of people and then create some type of economic model that's self-sustaining, instead they can put their land into Cohere, and the Cohere Network can raise funds. And then we can build out a center there. And one of the things that's really important for us is that you don't just start a village and you don't just start a culture. There's before you can have a village, you need a culture. And before a culture, you need a community. And before you have a community, you need trust. In order to build trust, you should break bread for 3-6 months, get to know each other. And that's what we're building with Cohere. It's the onboard ramp to sustainable village. But we're starting at these co-living, co-working spaces where we come together and grow into a community together. And so I'm kind of jumping around in a couple different spots.
No, it's it all connects. It all makes sense. There's actually a beautiful through line that you established there with the building. How do you build a culture? You build trust first. You build relationships. That builds community. That builds collective fun. It builds a commons, and then you want to play together. You don't mind if I simplified it a little bit.
No, man, that's it. Because if you can't just fabricate community. Community evolves through trust. And
exactly. Like language matures and relationships mature. Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing right now. It's like people with land, we're coming in building out these centers to facilitate people to connect and then build those roots to then start long-term living together. So yeah, we can see the step-by-step approach.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, so we're really tying in very innovative infrastructure to, oftentimes what we've seen as to why communities fail all around the world for ages is a consequence of like human coordination, right? And we're now seeing with the rise of cryptocurrencies and cryptographic technology and, and more colloquially Web3, what we're really seeing emerge is new ways of not only distributing value, but new ways of distributing ownership, as we're doing with Cohere, but also responsibilities. So we're tying in like incredibly exciting, innovative infrastructure to create transparent, immutable, and really value-adding technological services to power this whole thing that just sits on the back end of everything that we do at Cohere. So that's like incredibly exciting and empowering for the users as well.
Could you give a little bit of an example, Marcus, of how Web3 and your background in this new infrastructure building and modeling interfaces with what has been the Cohere structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to give you one example, and perhaps like a very primordial one, is how we are sort of operating as a team, as a community, right? So oftentimes in the way societies are sort of cyclical in the sense that they operate from decentralization to centralization, decentralization to centralization. So the founding of the US, for example, was founded upon a radical decentralization of power. It was people getting incredibly sick of this tyrannical, overlord and making the very intentional decision to, hey, we can re-envision a new way of doing things, right? And so that's something that we really take into Cohere's model now, is how can we create a system whereby, and again, relying on blockchain technology, where all of the transactions, all of the operations that go on in the background, you mentioned governance earlier, for example, right? Like that's one of the things that through this technology, we will be able to publicly, propose things to the community, and everyone in the community will have say as to whether or not things are executed or not within Cohere, which is incredibly empowering for the end user when you think about it. Going from these systems where you have no representation in the governance systems that are around you and the society that's being built around you, to all of a sudden having direct say over things that really matter to you, that's really the essence of Cohere and what we're incredibly excited about. So that's like one example, right? Is just the way we operate as a company. I mean, and it's not something that we aspire to, it's something that we do day to day. So everyone at Cohere is incredibly empowered and enabled to seek out the path that they feel fits most right for them. And that just is creating this like incredibly magical sort of sense of empowerment and ownership as we move through building out Cohere.
That is so cool. It's so foreign from where we are today because people feel so disempowered. And we know that we live in a corporatocracy. And we know that even our elected officials are not making decisions for us, but for where the money comes from. I mean, it's just plain old, very corrupt. And it never is about the people. And this sounds like it's all about the people.
Yeah. And this is where the economic
a different
model,
emotional experience and a different kind of connection to the whole space of governance.
100%. And that's where we really see the economic model being so critical. So imagine if every US citizen owned a share of the GDP.
Yeah.
And that's in effect what we're creating with Cohere. So with Cohere, we have people who invest in Cohere who really see the value of currencies, of cryptocurrencies. So I'm going to go on a tangent and circle back. So one of the things we see in cryptocurrency, so inflation is going very, very quickly up. The US government has printed 30 to 40% of all the dollars, right? In all the dollars ever, just 30 to 40% have just been printed. So the value of the dollar is going down. So people are looking for a safe place to put their money, and many people are putting their money into crypto. Now, crypto is very speculative. Cryptocurrencies, by and large, are just ones and zeros, and they're going up in value because more people are putting money in and increases the price. What we're doing, on the other hand,
is not inflation free. So even though people are jumping in, it's a lateral jump, if you will. It's interesting because it's digitized, but it's still based on a faith-based system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
like
exactly.
a religion.
Yeah, in many ways. So with Cohere, the coin is actually a share of the hard assets, of the real things.
Yes.
And we believe the gold today, we believe that, shoot, you have a whole bunch of gold, you have a giant portfolio of stocks, but if supplies chain break and you can't get access to food, water, or safe community, well, your portfolio doesn't mean anything. And so the coin that we've launched is actually asset backed. And so it's a security, but it's also a coin. It's also a crypto token. And this creates a whole new world, because why would one invest in a cryptocurrency that doesn't have real assets behind it? And moreover, we believe at least the most valuable assets are real estate with food, water, and community. So that continues to create this incentive of this commons, and it's really a great opportunity for investors who are looking for a safe haven, the upside of crypto, but with the stability of real estate. But moreover, then, and every member has to invest something to become a member. We believe that everyone needs to be an owner in this culture. And one can invest fiat currency or cryptocurrency, but members can also invest their expertise, their labor, all the skills that we have. And what this starts to do is, if we have this commons, a collection of communities around the world that are banding together and pooling their assets into a commons, and their ownership shares are liquid, right? When you invest in a home, you can't just pull out a little bit of money off the home, by and large. So now, when one community increases the value of its land, let's say we reforest, because Ecuador, for instance, 90% deforested, we reforest the land, we increase the land value, we increase the strength of the watershed. Now we've increased the value of the land, we've increased the value of the commons, we've increased the value of everyone who's holding security tokens in the network. So now I have an incentive to help every other community share best practices. I have an incentive to help my mates, because everything I do to increase the value of the land, and again, the most important thing in land value today is how resilient is it, now increases my direct money. And so Cohere, our security token, is the gold of this, of whoever believes that it's important to hold food, water, and community. This is a safe place to build that pot and be part of it and be a co-creator with it.
Beautifully put. I always say to people when they say, inflation's coming, buy gold, I say, can you eat gold?
Yeah.
It's very strange why there's so much value put in that particular commodity. But as you're really putting it well, Dakotah, water, food, shelter, community, these are all actual tangible assets.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can call love a tangible asset, although it's good to be tangible when you're expressing it. But
that's important.
That's kind of funny, right? But what you're saying is where real value in our hearts, we know that this is where it is. And this also speaks to the basis of this is born out, if you will, in neuroscience and neuropsychology, that sharing and bonding and the release of oxytocin, because people are getting closer and taking care of each other and protecting each other and each other's interests. This becomes the basis of real community, ongoing, sustainable community. And that's what we need. We're sort of returning, we're coming like full circle to the way indigenous peoples lived, in a way, surprise, surprise, right? But it's also got the benefits of what we as a Western culture have come up with, technologies like what you're talking about, Marcus, with Web3 and, the crypto innovations and all that. It's like a blending of new and old in a rather beautiful way.
Yeah, I think you're precisely right. And it's not, I think everything in the world is meant to be for a reason, right? And so this notion that like one is superior to the other, like one mentality versus another, is just like a fallacy. But really the way we should be positioning this is just like remembering the fact that like Western thought and rational thinking is spun out of Cartesian dualism, right? I think, therefore I am, separating oneself because we have this capacity. Yeah, we have this capacity to think. And so that's like where a lot of this thinking basically stems from in the age of the Renaissance, right? Is, okay, I'm going to separate myself from not only my body, but all of the natural world because I'm this supposedly conscious being. And yes, that took us very far. It allowed us to sort of think about things that were completely abstract and really think of our minds as very sort of, it's what's enabling us to have this conversation right now, right? Because like all of these innovations have spun out of having the capacity to think in ones and zeros in a way, right? Which is not, by the way, necessarily the world operates. But so there is this sort of blending of like, okay, great. So we've done all this, we've innovated incredibly, and we've sort of leveraged this amazing technology. It's like, how are we just gonna see this number go up and down on our screens, or are we really going to return to the essence of not only, you know, as Dakotah was mentioning, like really nurturing community and having nourishing food and water and shelter, etc. But what are we going to do to also sort of cast our net wider and bring other people into the system? And I think that that's like a really fundamental part of Cohere. It's, if we can't rely, you know, the COP26, right, which is this huge gathering of governments. There was this brilliant activist that said, like, there's a reason and devastating reason that we are having COP26. Like, we should have figured this thing out at COP1, right? Like, why are we still failingly trying to address
26 years later?
Yeah, 26 years later, and we haven't figured it out. It should have been figured out from like day one, right? But the reality is we can't rely on national governments to address this problem. And so we really got to start taking these issues and really start integrating like individual responsibility into how we move through this world. And that's really what's incredibly empowering about Cohere too, is like we're enabling people and laying down the infrastructure for everyone to do that. So that's like just super important to what we're doing. It's not just like sort of for ourselves, but also the wider community that lives around us.
The democratization of community and economy.
Yes.
Politics, and if everybody's going to have a voice and everybody has a vested interest, it's the phrase keeps coming to me as I'm listening to the two of you of enlightened self-interest, which is something that I've been bandying about forever. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I don't think it's an oxymoron. I think it's actually right on.
Yeah. Yeah, we really agree. We oftentimes we use this analogy of building a bridge to a brighter future. Still is a step by step. And if you live in like Jordan Hall often says, you have like game A and game B. If you're stuck in the game A world, how do you even like, how do you make that bridge? How do you bridge over to
transition?
A whole? And that's what we're really designing Cohere for, where people can come in and start to build abundance together in the most meaningful ways. And as you really rightly and wisely pointed out, it's that heart connection. And it's that, and we really believe that it's practical and really maybe essential at this stage of, you know, maybe collective consciousness to align our self-interest in a very tangible, direct way. Because we're not offboarding the true cost of anything. We're actually really accounting. If you put energy in, you're gonna have a share. And now there's a way that we can all contribute and all win together rather than being pitted against each other. And that's the thing that excites me. And as Marcus is saying, it's like, and expand that to our local communities. Imagine like here where we're, you know, getting ready to build, we're gonna bonus each construction worker in security tokens. We're gonna pay in fiat because that's what's needed, but we're gonna bonus. Now, everyone who works with us starts to become an owner in the commons. And now the Cohere Center is owned by the larger community. And now the larger community really wants to steward this thing. And then the Cohere Center is bringing together the best in architecture and construction and regenerative ag and all the things to really showcase a whole new way that we can build in right relation that's not beyond sustainable, it's regenerative.
Yes.
So that's just an essential piece of Cohere. It's like, if we want to create impact in this world, if we want to change these systems, well, we believe the first step is let's connect the leaders together. And let's connect the leaders where we have aligned interests. And then let's build a whole new freaking economy around this, where we all can knit ourselves and our communities together and amp each other. and have huge, and we've seen the rise of Bitcoin. We've seen the rise of these cryptocurrencies that are in effect fairly dumb, or just not particularly valuable because they're not backed by gold. It's just another fiat in some respects.
Or even, just parenthetically, Bitcoin, which requires such intense use of electricity, it's actually anti-ecological,
Definitely, it's definitely an impact.
So it's on one hand starting off to build an alternative currency, which is kind of cool and sexy in itself. But then when you look at the actual mechanics of it, you go, well, wait a minute, is this really the way through? And so what you're saying about the Cohere coin, it has actual value in itself as a digital currency based on the way people live, make food, bring forth water, take care of each other, heal, celebrate. I mean, can you imagine getting paid for celebrating? But, if you will, that's part of what's going on here,
It's funny.
I mean, I think just like on that point, right, is given that we take equity as one of the sort of core values of Cohere and equitable access, right? So we don't just distribute this Cohere token based off of capital contributions, right? Because we believe that your gifts extend far past your financial contributions to an ecosystem. As Dakotah was mentioning, is if you're an incredible permaculturalist or energy healer or dance instructor, whatever it may be, we really want to recognize and celebrate those attributes that you bring to the table. So it's just like how we're sort of very holistically embedding all of these things into Cohere's model. Yeah.
I think you're onto it. So look, if the people who would be living there in any of the communities, they need to be an investor. And this is giving a larger understanding of what it is, by the way, based on what you were just saying, Marcus, to being an investor. It's not just your money. It's you're investing your heart, body, mind, and soul in a way of life, which is, in a sense, a way of being, in developing a new culture. So how exciting. It really is. I mean,
well, thank you. And we're launching a crowdfunding campaign towards the end of the month on March 22nd. And we've been prototyping this for the last year, just living the Cohere experience. And now we've built the platform, we've built the compliancy, we've built the foundation. And now we're ready to start building the buildings so that we can expand this from our core team of 20, 30 people to hundreds and thousands of people. And so we're really calling on anyone who really wants to help build a movement and own a share of this movement to contribute. And we're using so that any US citizen who's not accredited can invest. And we really see this as Mark is saying, is we really believe ownership is essential. And the funds that we raise will build these facilities. And then these facilities allow us to continue to bring together the different leaders to then help build more and more. And so we've been running events. We're running an event, from every few months, we're running an event where we bring together different experts in their domain to launch facilities in the different countries that we're operating.
Give an idea of what those are.
So right now we're lining up Ecuador, Guatemala, and Brazil. We're really focusing first in Latin America. We have partnerships in development from Japan to India. I mean, we have all the way down to Chile. I mean, we've got people extremely excited all over the whole world. And in this next year, we're really giving weight to our members who have the tangible skills to help us build this first phase, to build out these communities. And so we're raising fiat currency, we're raising money, and then we're also raising a pool of people who can contribute and self-organize to, again, garner more stake in the company to then build out the next phase of growth.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I know Better World has Cohere on its website, betterworld.net. under store, there's a big icon banner of you guys,
Oh, nice.
of
Okay.
us, because a better world, as you know, is wholly aligned with this vision. It represents the values that we embrace here at A Better World Promotions in Media and Foundation. And I just think it's great. I'd love to get deeper into the weeds with the two of you in another show where we can look at maybe some of the architectural and some of the aesthetics and food production. I'd love to take a look at, some of this
Man, I would
material.
love
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcus has a construction company here that they've developed a really innovative way of building through Stanford and Cambridge's accelerator, utilizing what's corrugated metal, but in a structural wall system. And so I just want to put a little pin in that. It's exceptionally exciting construction technology.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I want to learn more about that too myself. So fantastic, fantastic. And there are such wonderful things as hempcrete these days. And God knows, just so many innovations. The use of solar and wind combined with things that you and I have talked about, blue power, Dakotah, and other ways of orchestrating off-grid, truly off-grid lifestyles. So the technology is really here in our hands. And I think the intelligence of the partnership here and the community that you're building is going to be using them.
Yes,
and
it's
really exciting.
in the collective, one of the things from the economic perspective, let's collectively fundraise this. We collectively fundraise and then have a revenue model that has abundance. The profit Cohere raises, we put back into building more facilities, increasing the value of our token. And that's what I mean by Cohere as a nonprofit, because since all the money raised is on blockchain, every dollar is trackable. And so we just continue to raise money, put it back in, and continue to build more and more of these communities.
Yeah, so we really believe, just to sort of polish that off, it's like the idea of radical collaboration. Because like the more people we bring into our ecosystem, the more we're all working together to build things, the more powerful. And like this goes for the communities that people are trying to set up. This goes for the impact projects people are trying to really push forward. Like the more we can all collaborate and work together, the more effective these solutions will be, and the more systemic and more widespread they will become. So yeah, we really invite anyone and everyone who's interested in collaborating with us to reach out and build alongside us and with us, because it's where we're heading. We're really excited to take everyone and join us on this journey.
It's really beautiful. You build it and they will come, as they say. So it looks like it's being built. So thank you both, and let's continue the dialogue. I think we can go several steps deeper and further, and I think this audience will very much appreciate.
Well, likewise, thank you for having us, and looking forward to that.
It's my pleasure to have you both.
Really appreciate your time and looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Absolutely, sounds good. And we'll talk about Cartesian philosophy as well. I appreciate that. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. This is the world that we are creating. We're not leaving it to others, like Marcus was saying, to national governments. They've shown their cards. It's not working well. Some have tried very nobly. It's really up to the people on an individual and community level to make the world be the way we want it to be. So on that note, I hope you really got a lot out of that and can maybe see for yourself a place in this community or this series of communities and be part of the larger picture. So thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Now I just have to find the button.